Welcome to another broadcast of Truth Be Told, where we believe in experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet. Joining me now in studio, because Captain Ron is not in studio today, we have the one and only intuitive Trisha Carr. Today we have a former top secret security clearance FBI agent, Stan Deyo, with us. And we're going to be talking from Atlantis, Garden of Eden, and to UFOs and possibly the end of time through nuclear war. Stan was part of the exclusive Black Project, headed by Dr. Edward Teller, specializing in the development of flying saucer technology. So there's lots to talk about today, right here on Truth Be Told. So please welcome to Truth Be Told, Stan Deyo. Oh, thank you, sir. It's Stan. How you doing?
Doing well, thank you. Yeah, okay.
Did you like our audience appreciation of you?
Yes, it sounded kind of like a whoa, what happened here? Okay, it's kind of like a game show where they have the canned, I guess it was canned, but anyway.
What?
Well,
No.
you won prizes though.
That is not
Oh,
true.
that's good.
We're
That's
in
good.
Hollywood.
Yeah.
They all lined
Gotta
up
take
for
them
you.
home now.
Well, we are excited to have you here. This is, the topics that you have researched and been a part of for all these years is stuff that we love to talk about, and we hope our audience enjoys as much as I know we're going to. So let's just start off, and I want to know a little bit more of your background because as an top secret agent, I guess, working with the FBI. Tell us a little bit more about that, because a lot of people think, FBI agent, they know everything. They know every secret, every conspiracy theory. Is that true, Stan?
No, as you showed in your intro there, I was an undercover informant, I guess would be a better term than an agent, because I didn't go through Quantico. I was recruited by the FBI in Dallas because of some activity that was occurring in the company where I was that was illegal. It was communications between Israel and this company, and without permission, to be monitored by the State Department. So they wanted me to pass information back to them. And I didn't know at the time that they recruited me. This was back in 1970, late 1970, that the FBI had an internal war going. There was a war between the pro-Hooverites and the not pro-Hooverites. One of the things I had to do was report the comings and goings of people. And one day a helicopter landed in our parking lot, and several gentlemen got out in suits and came in and to the office of the guy that owned the company. It was a conglomerate of about 100 companies all put together. And I wasn't invited to the meeting because I was just over systems and programming. I wasn't privy as a vice president would be or something. So I had to dig through some trash and get some favors called in at the switchboard op to find out who these people were. And one of them was Murray Schottner. Another was the Washington area head of the FBI there, not Hoover, but the Washington area has a separate office. And I gave that report to my agent. I called up to give it to him, and he wasn't there. Got the names he wanted, and so I said to the secretary, I said, "Look, tell Blogs, my agent, that these are the people that attended this meeting." He really wanted to know who they were, and I gave him the names, and that was it. And I hung up the phone that day and went home outside of Dallas into Mesquite, and it was dark, and I heard a doorbell front door, and I went to the front door and opened it up, and there was nobody there.
Ooh.
And
Ominous.
X-Files.
Right.
Anyway, I kind of said, hello, anybody out there? I walked out into the steps, and there were bushes and shrubs around the front of the house.
Did they talk to you?
Voice off to my left.
Oh.
It's me, your agent. Get over here and get out of the light of the porch. So I did. And then he says, "You stupid little blah, blah, blah." He says, I told you to just tell it to me, not to my secretary. You've identified, a guy in the war against Mr. Hoover. And we're all going to get a hand slap over this. In fact, a really severe one. I said, "Well, gee, sorry, I didn't understand that instruction." But anyway, so one thing led to another. And within a few months, I was on my way to Australia due to, I think, another event that wasn't even connected with that. But that's what it was about. I was just an undercover person in a place they needed somebody really bad. And they didn't have time to choose somebody and put them in there. So that's how they recruited me.
So, okay, so that was the beginning, but because I think you also worked undercover with the FBI with the flying saucer technology. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
No. No, they weren't connected. I was.
Oh, they weren't.
No, my induction into that program occurred in the lunchroom at the company where I was assigned to be an undercover, and it had a lunchroom, canteen, cafeteria down on the ground floor that would service 1,000 people at a sitting.
Wow.
And I remember one morning I went down there, instead of using the executive coffee room up on the top floor where we were, I went down there to have a private cup of coffee. And there was no one in there except the staff that serve you. And so I was sitting there at my table all by my gentleman comes walking over with his cup of coffee, comes in the door, and I recognized him as one of the vice presidents of one of the insurance companies that we owned. And he came over and sat down right across from me on that table. I mean, if I'd want to be private, I couldn't have it. 1,000 seats, and he comes and sits right in front of me. I don't even know the guy. Anyway, and he says, hi, and he has this cigarette in between his second and third finger, like the Europeans. So he was a Polish guy. And big bushy eyebrows. I remember that. He stared at me. He says, hi, I'm from, I said, yeah, okay, I know that division. And yeah, how can I help you? And he says, oh, just chatting. He says, I understand that, on your blackboard there in your office on the back side, you've got some equations and things. I said, well, yeah. Yeah. And he said, what's that about? And I said, well, I do some research at home. And I sometimes do it up here when my staff is doing something else, and working on, a new kind of propulsion and a way to collect electricity from the atmosphere and use it for homes and stuff and that kind of stuff. And he just kind of raised his eyebrows a bit, and he says, take this down here on this piece of paper. This is the name of a friend of mine. I'd be very interested in talking to you. And I said, oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, right. Put it in my pocket and had my coffee and then left, and didn't call the guy because I thought, what's that all about? Some guy named Maxwell, Dr. Maxwell. Anyway, a month went by, and I'd had all this other drama with my FBI job, and we had a little bit of a breach there. And so I went down to have another private cup of coffee down in the lunchroom around the same time. I was the only one in there. Darn if he didn't come in as soon as I came in and sit down right in front of me. He says, you didn't go see my friend. You didn't call him. I said, no, look, I've been busy. What was his name again? He said, Dr. Maxwell. He says, I'm writing this down for you again. At 3 p.m. this afternoon, you will be at his office, his research facility. He's expecting you. Do it. So I said, right. Well, now with all the FBI drama that was going on in the background and things were a little bit tense, as I said, I'm thinking, is this connected to that or is it something different? So I go over at 3 o'clock to this place on, I think it was Lemon Avenue or Oak Lawn, something like that, over in North Dallas. And I was the only car in the parking lot. This long building.
Ominous again.
I know. You're like I'm watching a TV show. I'm ready. I'm eating my popcorn. Go ahead.
if I run on, just
no. So far it's good. So here we go. Yeah.
So anyway, I see it's not a glass door. It's a research facility, the James R. Maxwell Radiation Research Facility. As it turns out later, I found out that he was also a member of the Texas Law Enforcement Society, which could have connected to the FBI, but I don't know. But anyway, the FBI had told me in a meeting about a week before that they were going to try to get me out of the country because I might die for what I was involved in this internal breach. They suggested various countries that had no legal extradition, and so that would be protected from the fallout when the FBI divided. Anyway, that was them. Now I go to this Dr. Maxwell's long building there, and it's 3 p.m. There's a wooden door, and you can't see inside, and there aren't many windows. So I go up and I knock on the door, and nobody answers. So I turn the knob and open it up, and it creaks like in the movies, like that. And I look down this long, dark hallway, and there's a little spot of light way down there, about 3/4 of the way down on the right. And other than that, there were a bunch of closed doors and no noise. So I kind of walked in there very quietly and listened. Nobody there. I walked down to where that light was, looking behind me and see if any doors open. Nothing happened. Secretary comes out of a room, nearly scares me to death, right there next to the light. She says, oh, can I help you? And I said, oh, look, my name is Stan Deyo. I'm here to see Dr. Maxwell. Oh, that's right. Jim's expecting you. Okay. Thank you. And Dr. Maxwell comes out at the end of the hallway through these double doors with these green scrubs like doctors wear. And he is about 6 foot, maybe 10 foot tall, but he was 6 foot something, right?
Mm.
In his cowboy boots, and he had this big cigar stuck in his face and the World War II crew cut. And he comes over and says, "Hi, boy, I've been expecting you," gives him his big Texas howdy shake and come on into my office. So we go into his office, which is, very tiny. And he got behind his desk, and I got in a chair in front of him, trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing here with this guy. And I look around the wall, I see a photograph of him and Dr. Ed Teller drinking champagne on a submarine as they passed under the pole, and his degrees hanging all around here on the wall. I'm thinking, I'm in the wrong place, man. I hadn't got this kind of class. Wow. And I looked at it very quickly, and he says, "Okay, boy." He says, "Tell me what you're doing at home." I said,
You're like,
"What? in my lab at the back of the house?" Yeah, that'll do. So I'm thinking, I don't even know what words to use with guys like this, because they must talk in $50 words and equations and stuff. I said, "Well, sir, I've been looking at magnetism and electricity and gravity and a way to." But before I could finish it, he said, "Yeah, I know. You're doing anti-gravity, so are we."
Wow.
And I said, "You know that?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "How would you like to work on real anti-gravity craft with us?" And of course, there was this pregnant pause as I'm assimilating this, thinking, good grief. "Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. What does that entail?" He said, "Well, let me tell you, we've had anti-gravity since the early 60s. And we've used the kind of propulsion you were looking at for your plasma drive and found some problems with it." I said, "I'll bet the seals caught fire." He said, "Yeah, they did." So we went to another model. I said, good. Anyway, he says, "Look, we are going to send you to Australia, to our facility down there." And right now, he picked up the phone, punched his secretary, and said, "Call the Australian consulate in San Francisco. We're going to get his clearances set up and tell him it's another one of Maxfield's boys." And so that was the start of about 4 or 5 weeks of filling out forms and selling a house and converting everything in the share market stuff to cash. And
Wow.
he said, "You can tell no one, not parents, only your wife and children. They will go with you." But that was the instruction. So I said, "Okay, fine." And now, understand, I was still, the FBI guys are saying, "Look, we need to kind of get you to a safe country." And I said, because I had a meeting after I met with Maxwell with him, and I said, "Look, is Australia safe?" And they did a little thumb through a book there. He said, I think we have a LEAT with them, extradition treaty. Yeah, it was better than being here. Go. So, I thought, are we going to get on this plane and get blown up? Because I was accidentally reporting on a thing that affected the head of the FBI and the president. And it was like 3 days of the condor. I thought, I was just doing my thing, and
you're like, anyway, what did I get myself into?
yeah. And so, okay, they gave me the tickets for a particular Sunday. And so I thought, right, what I'll do is I'll go to the airport with the family, and I will tell my parents at the airport, that I'm going there and won't be back. I'll send stuff to them in boxes that I had, at the old house where I was, and they can forward some of that stuff later. But I said, I'm going to go a week early without telling anybody. So I changed my ticket to the Sunday before, got on the plane and zipped on down to Australia. And certainly the plane arrived intact. There was no blowing up or whatever. And in those days, the Sydney airport was dark. It didn't run 24 hours a day. It's like running into a country town.
Right.
So the wife and the 2 children and I, we were sitting there in this dark airport inside. No ticket counters were turned on, nothing. And this guy comes walking down the hallway and, had a flight captain's uniform on. And he came over and said, "Hi, folks, what are you doing?" "Oh, we're waiting for the things to open so we can take a flight on down to Melbourne." He said, "Look, I'm taking a flight down now. Come on down on my flight." I said, "Okay." He said, "Yeah, look, I'll when the lights come on here, I'll take your ticket over and we'll change you over to my plane. You can come on down." So he did, and it was a commercial flight, and it didn't blow up. We landed in Melbourne, and I had arranged privately to meet a friend of a friend down in Melbourne when I got there. And I waited. We slept for about, I don't know, 16 hours, it seemed like, in this hostel because I was keeping a very low profile. And I called this guy who turned out to be later one of my best friends in life. And he says, yes, John said you were coming, and I will arrange get you a car and a house very quietly. And this is not government. This is just civilians, right? So he did. And I thought, well, I shall think about this before I do anything. I'm going to keep my head down. I'm going to get a job here or something with computer business in Melbourne and wait till I'm contacted. And that went on for 6 months. And in the meantime, I worked on the paper for the thing I was working on. I do my work at the company there in Clayton, and then I'd work on my stuff because it was boring to doing the rest of the Caterpillar tractor stuff in their computer business. Anyway, so when I finally made a breakthrough, I wrote a quick letter to Dr. Maxwell to tell him where I was, what I was doing, and what I had found, what I discovered. And he fired a letter right back and to me and to the head of the Aeronautical Research Lab down there in Fisherman's Bend in Melbourne, which is where they did, testing of all kinds of aircraft, whatever. And he says, all right, you'll contact Sir John Williams. He's the prominent man in your area. He'll be your control. You'll meet with the head of the Aeronautical Research Labs, Dr. Keeble, and we'll tee up that appointment. So they did. And before I got to that meeting, I called Sir John. His butler answered, and Captain Sir John Williams was very famous for World War II, worked for the Queen, got knighted and everything else. And when I was put through to him at his home, I said, sir, you probably don't know me. Dr. Maxwell. He said, oh, yeah, I know who you are, Stan. We're going to have lunch at the Melbourne Club. Take the train in. We'll meet you at the station. So I did, and this very tall, kind of, ruggedly handsome 85-year-old guy or 80-year-old guy, he had the gray hair and tall and slim. It looked like a ship's captain in a suit. And his short, stocky...
Is that him?
That's him. That's Sir John. And he had a driver that drove the Mercedes, and the driver was an English version of Odd Job in Goldfinger, right? He was a judo type kind of guy. Anyway, they take me out and put me in the car, and the driver takes us off down the street there to go to the Melbourne Club. And I was still kind of puzzled by all this. He says, I'll explain all this when we get there. And so we go in and have lunch, and it's a very, very private club. It's the backroom smoke guys that make prime ministers and stuff like that. It's the same thing we have here. And then you look around the room, most of them are cotton tops. There were no young guys there. And, after we had lunch and had some port and stuff, I brought my pants. I told Dr. Maxwell about on the propulsion system. And so I showed that to Sir John when we were having port and cigars in that room, the other adjacent room. And he says, oh, wow, look at that. And he was looking at my saucer design, and he said, can I have a copy of that? I said, well, sure, this is yours. So I'll review it on the plane. I got to go to Jakarta this week, and I'll be back, and we'll pick it up from there. We get out in the car. The Mercedes parked out front waiting for us. We get in, and as we're driving back to the train station, I said, well, Sir John, look, I probably should give you my address and phone number and stuff. And he says, boy, you don't understand, do you? And he reached in the little side pocket of his seat there, and he pulls out this about 3/4 inch thick file, and he says, this is you.
I got your numbers.
You're like, don't worry about that.
Yeah, don't worry, we know who and where and what. Yeah, so anyway, then I went to the Aeronautical Research Lab. It's now called Defense something or other in Canberra. They moved it and put another guy in charge of it. But anyway, I went there, and there was Dr. Tom Keeble in charge of the department. There was one guy that was an atmospheric physicist who later became the head of the department when it moved to Canberra, and 2 other physicists, all with above top secret clearance. We sat in there, and they said, first thing we want to know is, did ASIO contact you when you came to the country? I said, what's ASIO? Australian Security Intelligence. That's our FBI. I said, no, I didn't, as far as I know, get approached by them at all. Okay. Okay, tell us what you've done, and we'll tell you some of the stuff that we're doing. So I told him about the design, whatever, and how it would work. And I said, I understand you guys have got like footage of some of the UFOs that we didn't build. And they said, yes, that's correct. And I said, well, can I see them, or some of them anyway? See how they perform.
Did you say that you didn't build or did build?
These were made by Offworlders.
Okay.
They do exist. Trust me, they do exist. But anyway, I kind of, I said, well, can I see these things? Are they at the RAF base here or what? And Dr. Keeble and these three physicists, they all looked at me and said, oh, no, you'd have to have special clearance for that. But while they were saying that, they were pointing with their fingers at the bookcase right next to Dr. Keeble and nodding, maybe, like that. And I realized that they were bugged. And the meeting was just about finished after we discussed a few more things. But I looked out the window, and this long stretch black limousine pulled up outside Dr. Keeble's office. And the physicists that were there with him said, oh, wow, you lucky dog. I wish we could go to those meetings you get to go to. And that was the heads of the project stuff. So anyway, he went down and that was it. And I went home, and a few days passed. I was working on what they told me to do. And I went down to the end of the block where my house was there. And it's dark. And those, in that country, they have miniature 7-Elevens, a family-owned business. They call them milk bars. And you go in there, get your smokes or your snacks or whatever. I think about the size of a living room if it's that big. Anyway, I walked down there to get some marshmallows, hot chocolate, and cigarettes for the missus and stuff. And I was standing in line, and this guy comes in the door behind me and right up behind my neck and kind of leans over and whispers in my ear. He says, do not turn around. I will see you outside. He says, you were at the Aeronautical Research Labs yesterday, weren't you? And I nodded my head yes. And he says, I'll see you outside. And I heard the door close and looked around. There's nobody there. I'm thinking, holy,
As I changed my shorts.
I got the stuff I was supposed to buy, and I walked out there, and there was no one there. So I started to walk back to the house, and out of the bushes comes a guy to the left, and he says, hi, I'm Dr. David Wheeler. I said, okay. He says, I work at Aeronautical Research Labs, and your file landed on my desk, your report. And before I had time to read it, the director came and took it off me and said I didn't have clearance high enough to read it. I review everything. In fact, just as a side note, he's the guy that invented the black box for aircraft that we all use today. And he was a bright fellow. Anyway, I said, well, how did you find me? He says, I live right across the street from you. I said, well, that's convenient. And I said, well, if you want to see a copy of the paper, nobody told me I couldn't share it with you. I'll just be sure it drops in your mailbox there across the street and you can have a read. So these little coincidences happened, but I certainly was not without keepers everywhere I went. Time went on, and I learned a few things about this whole operation, which was kind of an eye-opener for me. Dr. Teller was the head of the American-Australian, well, even over the Australian, he was the head of that too. And in Russia, who were members of the same project, we had Dr. Andrei Sakharov, the Nobel Prize winner, who was the equivalent of Teller there. We had facilities underground in West Germany, in Norway at the border close to the Russian border. It's a base for the NATO group. And then we had some in Canada and Australia and New Zealand. Anyway, we had bases everywhere. But I found out that we shared these bases with human-looking people, but they weren't from around here. And the reports of all these little gray critters and tall gray critters you see in the conspiracy things, well, these were organic robots. They're really quite clever because when we make them, they've got oil joints and metal and that kind of stuff. When they made them, they actually genetically engineered them and put intelligence into them.
Wow.
So this is AI that is made. Are you saying that they look like grays and they're AI that were made by grays?
They were made by the slightly taller people that look like us. They're actually quite handsome as far as the reports I got. But
The tall whites?
say again?
The tall whites, by any chance?
Well, I think some of them refer to them as Nordics because they have a fair
Yeah.
complexion and fair
Yeah.
hair.
The
Kind
tall
of blonde
whites.
like someone else, Trish.
Right, yeah.
Trisha, maybe Trisha's one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
but
what it
actually,
is.
yeah.
Yes.
And years later in the 70s when they made this, Kenneth Johnson made that movie, the V series, where they come
Yeah.
as humans, but they're really lizards underneath. Well, the rumor I got from one of the security guys was that, what he told me was that when you see these guys outside, the Nordic looking persons, in the sunlight, their skin cells on the top are not like ours. They're slightly like a scale, and it forms a kind of rainbow look when you turn it in the sun, like an oil slick would, which sounds quite pretty. But anyway, and I may have met two of them, a man and woman couple that were headed off to the United Nations when I was down there from the organization. But I do know that they were taller, in my case, probably about a foot taller, maybe half a foot, something like that. And I had to look up at them, the man and the woman. And I met them in their home before they were flying out. And I remember thinking, this feels weird. I feel like a canary with the cat sitting at the door of my cage.
I was going to ask you how you felt when you first came in contact.
Yeah, it's a creepy feeling. I mean, it wasn't anything they said, but it's how they said it and what they were going to do at the United Nations. I mean, these are people that move and shake the world.
And they spoke English and everything. They sounded.
Yeah, look, if you weren't being kind of suspicious, you'd think, oh yeah, these are just tall, beautiful Nordic people, probably Viking descendants, and that's it. I mean, and they didn't have like slit eyes or that kind of stuff. They looked just normal.
Did they look frail at all? Because I'm just the stories I've heard about Nordics.
They weren't fat.
Tall whites.
They were thinnish. They were kind
of
healthy, I guess would be the word. But anyway, I was glad to get out of there. And that was that. Let's see. We shared the bases with them. This started after the Roswell event and another one in northern Arizona as well. The United States and several other of the allies got together with these beings, and they made a treaty, which these beings immediately violated, but still they made a treaty in exchange for anti-gravity, molecular physics, where you can walk through walls and open doors out of solid metal and put them back together again with just a push of a button.
That's cool.
Some really neat technology and some medicine as well. And they would exchange this technology with us for us supplying them infrastructure to manufacture underground their own weapons and technology. And so they had their section, we had our section. And when it got to a point in the mid to late 70s that they didn't need us anymore, we had given them enough to let them build all the stuff they wanted to in their own manufacturing complexes underground. They wanted us out. The deal's off, deal's finished, get out. And several running battles did occur, as far as I could tell from the security detail that I was with. But the technology that we now use to fly some of the triangular-shaped craft that are ours, they let us use that within certain parameters, and they let us use certain technologies. And as long as we don't, the humans, as long as we don't share that too much, we're kind of being governed by them behind the scenes for a time to come here very shortly.
Okay. Can I ask you something real quick? I don't want to jump.
Sure. I'm sorry.
I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I'm curious that we have that technology, not just now, but even 30 years ago. Is that correct?
Yes.
So my
actually 1962. That's more than 30 years.
That's 50 years ago. So my question is how would we even be even close to a nuclear war or something of that kind if we already have that technology that really anybody in the third world country that's trying to even get nuclear war? So it sounds like we're already way ahead of nuclear weapons. So
well, we are to a degree, the humans are, but these other critters, call them what you want, but these other people, they have superior technology to what we have, and they can certainly control whether missiles fly or explode or whether the nukes detonate at all.
Right.
If you'll notice, there have been a number of UFOs, lights in the sky over our nuclear facilities. And according to rumor, they have been able to switch off the active button, if you
and
wish.
I've heard that before, yeah.
Devices.
So we are. I'm sorry. We are at odds with these Nordic beings now.
Well, I am, and the people that still work with them are heading toward a one world government that will be run by an individual that the Offworlders will appoint and back with technology. I knew this day was coming because of what they told us and what I'd found out back there in Australia, but they're going to use this cashless society. They're going to give us the opportunity to use bio IDs, which will be implanted into us, or a hand or the forehead, just like the Bible says, which is really kind of spooky in itself.
That is kind of spooky, yeah.
So that nobody can steal cash, can counterfeit cash, can do illegal activity like drug lords and stuff like that, because everything you do will be through a digital system that can be monitored, and they'll be using what's called a blockchain exchange between banks and corporations. That's already being developed now. But say you buy a car, your name will go in the blockchain that's paying for that car and bought it from a dealer. Now the car, you sell it later. The car now has the original dealer, your name, what you paid, and the new owner in his name. It's a blockchain that keeps building the history of that asset. Anyway, they wanted to set this up, and they're going to. And the Earth has already been partitioned into 10 new regions, which are super regions over nationalities that we now have, or countries that we now have. I've listed that in the back of the Cosmic Conspiracy book that I wrote in 1978, just a few years after I left the organization. And on page 200, it has the map showing those 10 regions, and page, I think it's 196 through 199 in the book, I list every country and what region they're in at that time. And they were put together, these regions, by people with common socioeconomic, political, and religious factors. Israel and South Africa, believe it or not, were in the same group together for some reason. I don't know why, but anyway, that's what they're doing now. In the 1974, I believe it was, there was a knock at my door there in Melbourne, and Sir John's butler was there, and he deposited a big box with all my papers and correspondence and everything. And he said, we're leaving this with you. Our office is clean now, then, and destroy it, do whatever you want to with it. We will not talk again. And what had happened about a week before that, over at the Melbourne Club, Sir John and Sir Henry were sitting together with me at lunch, and another guy from Tasmania. And Sir John was talking to Henry, and they were talking about, Sir John waved his hand back over his head. He said, Henry, they're moving in on us. And I waited for them to explain that, and nothing happened. And I thought, because these guys are politicians as well, I said, oh, do you mean by they, the European Economic Community is moving in here in Australia? And he looked at me like I'd done a rude thing at the table, and he says, Henry, going to the property to fish this weekend? We'll have to catch up there. And they're moving in on us should have been a clue. What happened when they brought that box of stuff to my door? They did this to me and to another guy that was like me up in London at a university there. They were disappearing us because the battles had started in our underground facilities, and we were being shut out, and they were trying to protect us. So it forced me to run, to change a name and get into the Australian Nullarbor Desert and whatever, and head for the West Coast, by whatever means I could. And I survived, because when I got to West Australia, to Perth, the ASIO branch over there was very kind to me. They were aware of the situation, and they were different than the one in Melbourne and in Sydney and Canberra. And they said, we're going to protect you. We'll assign an army officer with a 45 to be with you whenever you're in public making these speeches, and we'll look after you, which they did. And in fact, they assigned another agent to me too, that he was like an odd job guy, a really nice guy, but he took care of me. And even he said, one morning he called me up, and he would call and he would say the name of a place, and I would go there to meet him for a briefing. And this particular morning, they always like to come out of the bushes or something, but anyway, it was daylight, and he came over and he said, did you read the paper this morning? I said, oh, not yet. Why? He says, the ASIO headquarters was broken into, and there was a little bit of a fire, and someone was shot and him killed. And I said, gee, what happened to that? He said, well, I thought we ought to tell you, because the guy broke in, got to the files room, and he had your file in his hand when we shot him. And I thought, oh, that's sad. So that tells you kind of the value that they placed on what I knew. And that's when I realized that, one of these days I'm going to have to write a book or do something, but I didn't know how to do it. And
right. But writing a book and exposing this, were you ever fearful for your life at that time when you were writing the book and when it was released?
Yeah. I had to publish it myself eventually, but I'll tell you what had happened. I had gotten to work, formed a partnership with a guy. We had a calculator camera shop there in Perth together, and still under my assumed name, but he knew what my real name was, the partner. And I lived out in the suburbs there in a place called Dianella. Anyway, I went to take one of these old, what they call armoires, the portable closets. I had too many of them in this house that I was renting, so I threw it in the back of my station wagon type thing and drove over to the tip, the garbage dump.
Right.
And I was just going to take it out and throw it down the hill or whatever you do with it. Well, there are a bunch of garbos there that have licenses to mine all the junk that you bring so they can, sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a D9 dozer sitting there. I mean, this is, a big dump. Anyway, I started to pull it out, and the guy had pulled up behind me, another customer, and he jumped out of his car. He says, oh, wait, are you throwing that away? I said, yeah, I've got too many of them. He says, well, can I have it? I said, sure. He says, I shoved it back, in the car. It'd only come out 2 or 3 inches out in the air, and I shoved it back in. Well, the garbo comes over and says, oh, no. That's ours now. And the guy says, no, it's not. I didn't touch it. He's going to come home with me. I'm going to take it. So the garbo waves at the guy in the D9 and says, take his car over the side. And so the D9 comes to shove this guy's car over the side of the tip down into the, the valley there. And the guy pulled out his wallet and flashed the badge, says, police, do it, and you're in jail. So the guy backs off. And by this time, we'd collected a crowd of other people visiting him. And so the policeman says to me, look, come over to my place and we'll have a cup of tea. So I went over, and this whole gaggle of people came with him, all strangers. And we sat down in his living room and had a cup of tea that afternoon and had a laugh. And the guy asked me, how I came to Australia and stuff. And I told him a bit of what I've told you here about the project and the flying saucers and stuff. And that was it. Went home. Well, a couple of days later, I'm out in the front of my house watering the lawn. And this car drives up, and the guy gets out. That was one of the people at the tip that went home with this policeman and us. He says, oh, hi, look, my name is blah, blah, blah. I'm a TV producer here at Channel 9. And we're doing a documentary on, flying saucers and things. And we've got all the leading lights. We've got Steven Spielberg on it and everything else. And we'd like for you to come tell your story. All right. So they gave me a 20-minute add-on to the end of it, a private location, and, all the mystique that goes with Hollywood down there even. And so we put it on air, and it was the highest rating documentary they had, Save the Whales type stuff,
Right.
Wow.
Right.
And so the station management said, look, we're going to do a 3-part series. UFOs are here, Deyo UFOs are here, and UFOs are back, and studio audiences. And they did all that. Well, a guy was watching it over in Melbourne who owned a publishing company. And he rings me and he says, look, we'd like to publish a book. I said, well, I haven't written a book yet. Well, we've got editors and writers. We can do it for you. All you got to do is just tell us about it. So I made notes and played the game with them for a while. And they burned out one writer. He quit. Another one started. And they had enough for an editor to look at. The editor said, this is too hard. And so I flew over to Melbourne. And, I said, guys, you're not performing according to the contract. I'm taking my book back. I will do it. And so I started writing the book, not being a professional writer. Of course, it probably looks like that when you read it, but I just wrote the tale of what happened and where we're going and the things I discovered. And yes, I was in fear of my life. And so I told enough in that book that they knew that I could tell more, and I would do that, or somebody would, if anything happened to me. So it was my insurance policy, and it eventually sold 250,000 copies or more.
Wow.
That's great.
French, English, German. Anyway.
Well, because of time, I can already tell this is going to be a part 2, and I hope you come back for a part 2. But I'm curious when you say that something big is about to change, and do you feel that we're already in the transition, and do you feel this is a worldwide worldwide government where it's it's not just the U.S., the Australia, and the U.K. Do you feel like this is pretty much every government that's participating in this, or no?
Majority of them, yes. Those that aren't will soon. Understand that what the plan was from the end of World War II when these allies got together with these critters was to figure out a way to form a new kind of government on the planet where you didn't have, religious bigotry or political bigotry, no history. It was going to be clean. And they knew that Hitler had failed to do it by force because the French resistance proved that you just can't keep them down if you try to, dictate to people. And they knew that the United Nations and the League of Nations before that had failed, that, you couldn't get more than 2 or 3 people in a room trying to get an agree on a cup of coffee and they have an argument. Well,
right.
The United Nations, you had hundreds of nations, and it just was not working as a democratic process. So what was the third option? The alternative 3. And that alternative was, let's fool them into a world government with a neutral party that comes from off the planet. We're going to invent elder brothers in space. But that's when our guys met the real deal. And they didn't need to invent it anymore. But that was the idea, was to bring a peaceful, super technological race to the planet at a time when we have a crisis point, like with threat of nuclear war. Well, that's today. Famine, well, that's today. Diseases, pandemics, well, that's not too widespread yet, no. Economic crisis, collapse of the world economy. There were a number of crisis curves that they had to bring all together at the same time, so that the people all over the world would be thinking, our governments aren't worth a darn. Can someone solve this planet? We can't even deflect a meteor when it's coming into our atmosphere. We're in trouble. Okay, and then the guys in the flying saucers come in and say, look, we're not going to interfere with you. It's like the Star Trek thing, but if you ask us, we will help you. We'll help you organize your planet and how to save yourself from all these different crises. And that's where we are now. The crises are being accelerated, some natural or some planned. The change in the sun is something that I don't think anybody did on purpose. That's the sun is aging very quickly at the moment, and
really,
it's going to do something interesting too in the next decade or less. Anyway,
wow.
Can I ask the critters, as you call them, the Offworlders, those who will help us out? Yeah.
Where are they from?
Sure, that if you have that idea. But I was actually curious as to your opinion, if they actually are benevolent, and are interested in helping us, if they are like in service to others, or if this is like you're saying, if you're saying that this is a ruse and they are actually going to somehow subjugate us, and that they are actually deceptive and malevolent. I'm just curious what your perspective is on that.
They are like in the movie V. They are deceptive and malevolent, but there are 2 groups of them. There are the good guys and the bad guys.
From the same planet or
no,
star?
it's not a planet, actually. It's a parallel universe.
Okay, gotcha.
We do have concentric universes, and you can gate between them. And there was a war in the higher energy density universe around us. And these beings were ported through with limited things in their suitcase. So that's why they had to have us help them to build their infrastructure, because they had to make the stuff for a battle they're going to continue here on the earth when the good guys come through the gate, the portal, like Nimrod was trying to build.
So is this the malevolent ones, the deceptive ones? Are these the reptilians?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other ones, the good ones, are these the Nordics, or are these the advanced Greys, or the Essassani, or the Yael, or the Anunnaki? I know all kinds of them.
There are a number of names, and although I have not met, other than just that couple I'm telling you about,
yes,
the Canadian former defense minister did say that there were a number of races present here. Now, these may be a number of the guys that followed the leader in this rebellion in the parallel universe and were cast here for this battle. The Bible talks about a hybrid being, just like in V, except it's Jesus, and he has half human, half God, half off-worlder DNA. And
Mhm.
he's apparently the son of the creator that created this whole virtual universe we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's the way I'm seeing it anyway. And there's going to be a war here, I'd say in the next decade or so, where the off-worlders that are bad, there are a variety of structures and appearances of them, will fight here on the earth and around the earth with the good guys coming through to settle the issue and clean the planet, restore the natural balance of things, and get rid of all the bad guys, lock them up.
And so the bad guys are the reptilians, but there are several races of good guys that are interested in helping us. And because right, is this? Am I getting that straight?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Bible is, a lot of people use Bible speak, but they talk about Satan and the dragon.
Yes, right.
Have you ever thought about every culture on the planet has a dragon in their history? The reptilian thing, some with wings, some without, some with 4 claws, some with 3 claws. 4 claws and 5 claws are their emblems are used by the ruling families of these countries. But every country, no matter whether they're Asian, European, or what, has a dragon in their history. That's the reptilian type thing that I think we're talking about. The other races that are subservient, that created robots, the biological robots, well, I don't know if there are more of these made by the other groups, but certainly the Nordics did that. That's why so many reports of abduction say they were soulless eyes and they didn't care whether we were in pain when they were operating on us. They just looked on and they're like, well, so what? This battle will occur, I think, at the end of what the Bible calls the tribulation period. That's the Armageddon conflict. The technology that they speak of is going to be something like nuclear in the Middle East, and it will melt the eyes and the tongues and the tissue off the body while they're yet standing. It's going to be a nasty thing. This happened before in that region, in Afghanistan, the Indus Valley, in Harappas and Mohenjo-Daro. They found burned skeletons facing in the same direction. They were all blown down by something that fused the pottery like glass, like atomic blast would. So this is going to happen in that area again. And we'll get to talk about some of the time. Once you see what Atlantis was, all of Saudi Arabia, what caused it, you'll see why this area is so focal to all that's about to happen and what has happened before.
Oh my God, we only have about 2 minutes left. I can't believe that you're coming back. I mean, this is
right,
so this is so fascinating, and
I want to talk about Atlantis.
Yes,
so, yeah, we have to.
So you're
have
definitely
me
going
on
to be
for
here.
that show.
Yes.
Atlantis is real.
I know. Oh, absolutely.
All right. Well, I so appreciate you being on. Truth be told, you're such a fascinating man, and your research and your just living it. Is amazing. So I appreciate you sharing it with us, because so many people don't want to talk about, because of the fear for their life or just.
I don't any longer. I've made it this far, and
I've right. You're doing all right. Well, do you have any new books coming out that we can look forward to, or?
It's going to be probably mid to late next year. I'm working on a book that's Vindicator Scrolls Volume 2.
Oh wow!
Which tells the search for Eden, and how I did it with modern equipment, and the discovery of Atlantis and what caused the flood. And I've discovered 2, maybe 3 large new asteroids that haven't been cataloged yet that hit the Earth.
Cool.
That kind of stuff. It'll be in that book.
All right. So, and we just in the few minutes left, I want to know, we just had a solar eclipse, the one of its kind for America since the 1200s. And so do you feel like there was an impact that on the planet, or a sign or a significance that on our future? Do you think that was?
The only thing I've seen, it would be in the realm of biblical prophecy, where they're talking about the September 23rd Virgo thing, alignment that Revelation 12 speaks of. Other than that, we have lunar tides in the Earth, and we have solar tides in the Earth. They're not as noticeable as the lunar ones, but when the two line up, they pull on the surface of the Earth, whether it's water or land. And if there's a fault line ready to go off, the thing can trigger them. It won't be the major cause, but it can be the trigger. And so I'm having a look now then to every full moon and every new moon, watch for major quakes. I used to be able to forecast them. The Navy no longer supplies me with that data.
Wow. Well, we appreciate you. And everybody go to Deyo, and that's DEYO.com, and you can pick up his books on Amazon, on his website. We so appreciate you. And Tricia, where do people follow you?
Oh, my website is triciacarcharm.com.
And you can listen to her on Sundays at 11 a.m. right on Channel 1 at UBN. And
11 a.m. Pacific.
Yeah, there you go.
You have a
And
global
please go to our Truth Be Told website at truthbetoldwebtv.com. Check out all the upcoming guests. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate you guys leaving comments and viewing our videos. So until next time, we'll see you right here on Truth Be Told. Well, hopefully Captain Ron will be back next week. Until then, bye.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?